You've met the three of us. Gren Schock, our chairman and founder, is on the line. Myself, the president of the company, and the head of the AirBoss Defense Group, our CEO, Patrick Callahan. AirBoss of America is a highly diversified company. We do multiple things, and I'll be talking about those. But firstly, just a couple of disclaimers. If we can go to page 2, please. There's some forward-looking information that we'll be talking about. I invite you to read through the disclaimers at your convenience. Nothing unusual, of course, in these first 2 pages. And then moving on to the next page. We essentially started out as a rubber company. And rubber is an essential product throughout the world. It's everywhere. And what many people don't know is it is sustainable because the rubber is tapped from trees, as is maple syrup, and it's polymerized and used in the production of rubber compounds that then have very specialized functions. And it's on that base of that technology that we service almost every industry you can imagine. On this next page here, you can see that we are North America's second largest custom compounder of rubber solutions. And we have 3 distinct companies. The first company is our rubber compounding group that produces this rubber for a variety of end uses. We have a second company, AirBoss Engineered Products, which makes rubber to metal bonded parts for vehicles. And a third company that you'll be hearing most about today, because that's where most of our COVID-19 response is centered around, is the AirBoss Defense Group, which started out using that rubber proprietary technology to build chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear protective equipment and PPE for soldiers that are in the field. In terms of our company's North American presence, you can see here on the next slide that we have facilities in Newmarket, Ontario, Kitchener, Ontario, Actonville, Quebec, Bromont, Quebec, Auburn Hills, Michigan, Landover, Maryland, Scotland Neck, North Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, and a joint venture in Kuala Lumpur. We have over 2 million square feet of production space, and 1 million of it is in the Kitchener, Ontario plant, which is a highly valuable piece of property on 18 acres in downtown Kitchener. That gives you a very quick overview of our company with the 3 business units. But today we really wanted to focus on our COVID-19 response. And I'll pass at this point over to the CEO of the AirBoss Defense Group, Patrick Callahan.
Great, thank you, Chris. Thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Patrick Callahan. I'm the CEO of AirBoss Defense Group. As Chris said, AirBoss of America has quite an installed base in North America, focusing on a number of industries. But today, I'm going to take some time and tell you a little bit about our defense holdings and what we've been doing in AirBoss Defense Group. AirBoss Defense Group was founded primarily with the thought of becoming a survivability business. My background, I've spent 20 years in the defense space. At the beginning of that time, I was a user. Spent 10 years active and reserve military. So as I go through some of the story, both about defense and our COVID response specifically, I've been on all sides of this story. So the beginning of my professional life was I was on the receiving end of using many of the products that I'll talk about today. But specifically what we're going to focus on today is the biological response and what we're doing to respond to the spread of this virus and trying to do what we can, specifically at AirBoss Defense Group, to help stop that virus and bring that bell curve down. AirBoss Defense Group was founded as a merger between 2 businesses, Critical Solutions International, which is a company for the last 20 years that is focused on counter-improvised explosive device, counter-explosive work, providing a vehicle that I'll talk a little bit about at the end of the presentation, and the chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear protective equipment from AirBoss Defense. And the thought process behind these 2 businesses was bringing two companies together that had a different product portfolio, but also different specialties. Critical Solutions was really focused on marketing and sales and program management and aftermarket service support, where AirBoss Defense was really focused on engineering, product development, and production. And so what we've created in this merger is the full value chain of a survivability defense business, with the thesis at the beginning of growing it, focusing really on the defense side, but over the last several months, what we've seen with the COVID response, that there is another market that is actually a larger market, that where our products have as much impact, if not more, and that's in the first responder and the medical workers market as well. This slide tells you a little bit about where that thesis came from. AirBoss Defense has legacy products from rubber manufacturing that have been servicing the warfighters both in the US internationally for decades. If you look left to right, I've been personally wearing these products for a number of years. You can see from the cold weather boot all the way to the right to one of our newest products, which is the low burden mask, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. We have really specialized in protective equipment to protect warfighters against, again, cold weather environments, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, or even explosive threats. But this slide speaks to the amount of backlog the company had even prior to the COVID response and the amount of need that we're seeing from the first responder market. The overall need for defense products has grown dramatically over the past several years, and I'll speak about this again at the end of the presentation, but the administration has been very clear that with the defense budget that's been published, they are addressing a very dilapidated military within the US, a military that's been dilapidated over the last 20 years from extreme use, both in Afghanistan and Iraq and the rest of the Middle East. And many of the programs and product sales that you're seeing on this page speaks to that need. Restocking shelves, improving products, taking some legacy products that have not been serviced over several years, and putting both research money in and procurement dollars in to bring better equipment to the warfighter. An example of that is the product you see to the far right, and it's a great example of the reason that at CSI we focused on the engineering and product development expertise that AirBoss Defense had. The low burden mask to the far right is an example of product development by taking a lot of the user feedback that AirBoss had heard for a number of years about current mask technology, filter technology in the chemical biological world, and using that to create what we believe to be the best-in-class gas mask in the world. Over the last 2 years, there have been 2 major global competitions for gas masks, both in Australia and Canada, and AirBoss Defense won both of those in straight-up competition against the largest gas mask and filter companies on the planet. So this slide really speaks to, again, prior to the COVID outbreak, this company and this merger to create AirBoss Defense Group was on a trajectory to really grow. And at the end of our first quarter, not including the COVID response, that thesis was no longer a theory. We were tangibly working and tangibly growing, addressing the defense market that in parallel to COVID response continues to grow and continues to have a dramatic need because there are wars still raging around the world. The Middle East is obviously a focus for us. Eastern Europe is a focus for us. But the defense side of our business is still extremely strong and growing at a rapid pace. What COVID-19 did for us was shift our focus both strategically long-term, and I'll speak to that, but also in the short term, having shaped our business to be able to respond rapidly for the threat that we saw growing internationally a few months ago, and obviously what's happened here domestically over the past 45 to 60 days. What we tried to do when the coronavirus and COVID-19 reared its ugly head internationally, we knew we had several products on the first responder and medical side of our business that could be a huge help in both mitigating the threat, encapsulating the threat in certain areas, and stopping the spread. We reached out to dozens of US correspondents, US federal agencies, anywhere from the CDC to the World Health Organization, to the State Department, to the White House Task Force, you name it, we were reaching out to these agencies to try and address and help internationally the best we could. If you look left to right, these are just a sampling of some of the products that we knew could be of assistance and some of the feedback we got from the international community at first. these were things they were looking for. Both our personal protective equipment, boots and gloves, although they're rated to protect against things as serious as sarin gas, mustard gas, and serious chemical threats, they will obviously help in the biological threat world as well. We got a lot of response internationally, and the good news is that we were already producing and are producing hundreds of thousands of these products for the defense market here in the US. So we were in production and capable of producing more at a very high rate for the international customer. Moving to the right, the Isopod. One of our products that's gotten a lot of traction is a casualty transportation shelter that allows you to, in a negative pressure environment with a filtered solution, allows you to encapsulate a patient in an Isopod and protect them and the medical worker from whatever the possible contagion that patient has been exposed to. So what it allows you to do is really protect that patient if their immune system has been compromised. You can see the armholes on the side of the Isopod. It also allows the medical workers to continue to do the work they need to do to keep that patient comfortable and to protect the medical worker as well from whatever that contagion is. We got a tremendous amount of feedback internationally, and to date, through the first quarter of this year, we have sold more Isopods in the first quarter of 2020 than we sold all of 2019. Our shelter space, the shelter space is a market that has several competitors. What we focus on being a CBRN company is the ability to create medical shelters, to increase medical capacity, to offer a sterile environment, to offer decontamination. The US DoD has signaled that we are the best in class for decontamination shelters. And again, we saw a huge signal internationally for that product as well. And then finally, our powered air purifying respirator. And really what is important to know about the respirator, and you've probably seen some news about this, what the respirator allows a first responder, a police officer, a medical worker to do is work in 100% confidence that they're protected. It's a filtered solution with forced air that gives you that 100% protection, different from, say, the N95 mask, which is a good product, but in a high shedding environment, like a medical worker is working on in ICUs, you are exposed to a tremendous amount of contagion. And that is the only solution. A filtered solution is the only solution that can give a medical worker 100% confidence that they are protected. So what shifted is we did get a tremendous amount of international feedback, but within about 30 days of those conversations, our focus shifted to the domestic need. The same conversations with the same agencies that we had for about 30 days internationally shifted to what can you do domestically? Working with the White House Task Force, working with FEMA, working with all 54 state and territory SEMA offices, so the state emergency management agencies that control the response for their states and regions, the National Guard, the Corps of Engineers. We got the same feedback at a much larger scale that we were getting internationally. What can you provide for personal protection equipment? How many Isopods can you ramp up and build? Because we have got massive amount of need to transport patients. What can you do for shelters? Because we've got a need on the medical side to increase capacity in places like New York, Washington State, California, Massachusetts. These probably resonate with things that you've heard on the news. And then finally, and most importantly to us right now, because we're executing, what can you do for a respirator mask capability? We worked directly with the White House Task Force. We got a call, as we had gotten from a number of other agencies. How many of these can you make, and how fast can you make them? We were in a very good position because of our partnership and ownership of AirBoss of America. We have the ability to tap into an incredible supply chain and an incredible surge capability to make a tremendous amount of product quickly. So we were able to commit to making 100,000 respirators and 600,000 filters in 90 days. Obviously, the feedback from FEMA was excitement, and we were put under contract in a very rapid fashion. So we're currently delivering product now. We've delivered product to New York, to DC, to Indiana, and on a weekly basis, we are shipping palletized hoods, filters, masks all around the country. So the PAPA response is the largest example, but I can give you analogous examples of several other products in several other agencies that have reached out. And again, the theme is, how many can you make as fast as possible to help them with this bell curve and to help over the next 60 days. Beyond that, we are in conversations right now about post-COVID-19 as far as the peak of the threat and what can we do as far as stockpiling beyond this initial threat. And that's really important for us strategically. What we're trying to understand as a survivability business that focuses primarily on defense is what is the post-COVID-19 emergency response going to look like? This space has been very difficult for us. It's a very fragmented space, and I'm speaking about the first responder, hospital, municipal space. Generally speaking, prior to COVID-19, companies would have to reach out to thousands of different customers around the country and around the world, working with municipalities, working with different police agencies, different fire departments, different SEMA offices, and we do believe some of that will continue post-COVID-19. But what we are hearing is that first responder equipment and where we stand today as far as stockpiling is not where it needs to be. We were in a very bad position as a country to respond to a biological threat. I've been in these conversations. We've had several strategic conversations with large acquisition authorities that generally focus on defense acquisition. They've been brought on board to think about post-COVID-19 and what the strategy is to grow stockpiling and to grow the amount of equipment that municipalities can reach into and stockpile at certain hospitals in certain cities to make sure that we are not ill prepared again. So we're focused right now on ramping up and delivering as much as we can for the immediate threat, but we are in conversations about the ongoing strategic thought process about how we're going to be doing acquisition post-emergency. And so what we believe it will look like is that it'll look somewhat analogous to how we attack and go after the defense space. The defense space is a much more centralized acquisition process. You've got a handful of acquisition authorities that are responsible for acquiring product for the Air Force, Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. And it's a much faster process because you're not reaching into thousands of municipalities and trying to work through all of that bureaucracy. You're focused on a handful of acquisition authorities where you compete, you win, and you deliver. And we believe that that's the direction they're going to be going with a number of these products. And the good news for AirBoss Defense Group is that we have been identified as probably one of the handful of businesses that is proving itself to have best-in-class technology for first responder and medical workers, and we're proving ourselves by being able to deliver at a very, very rapid pace, which is what the defense world and I think what the first responder world is going to need going forward post-emergency. So this slide again just speaks back to our original thesis and the direction we are going as a business. We are a survivability business. We are a defense company. We focus both domestically and internationally. We still have a tremendous amount of international need for all of the business units you see on this slide. We break our company down into 4 basic business units. I've spoken about each of these a little bit, but under the wearable products, whether it be our rubber boots and gloves, our cold weather equipment, we are still delivering these again in the tens and hundreds of thousands to Defense Logistics Agency, for the US, and for a number of international customers around the world. Gas masks and filters, we have both tactical and first responder products. So for the White House Task Force and FEMA program that we're working on right now, that is a non-tactical medical response system. You can see in the picture you're seeing here, that's a tactical system that is sold to both the National Guard and the US military, international militaries. So we are beyond just gas masks and filtration masks. We are one of the largest producers of filters in the world. In our Landover, Maryland facility, we produce hundreds of thousands of both chemical and biological filters that are NATO rated, which means they can fit into our equipment or other mask providers around the world. So it allows us to both compete with our own equipment, but installed bases for other masks that could be possibly installed around the planet. Collective protection, we're working right now, as I said, on responding to increase medical capacity for the first responder space for the COVID response. But we have a number of programs that we're working on for the defense space. Our decontamination shelter, as I said before, has been identified as the best in class in the U.S. market, and the U.S. DoD has already created a program of record, which means Congress has identified decontamination shelters as needing to be programmed and sustained for 10 to 20 years. So it's a very large program, and we are in the beginning of that competition right now. And we are positioned very, very well. And then finally, route clearance. The route clearance space is one that continues to be extremely important. And what route clearance is the search and mitigation of explosive devices. The vehicle that you see here is the Husky mounted detection platform. It's the first ever mine-protected vehicle that was introduced to the U.S. military in the Afghan and Iraq wars. It's designed to identify explosive threats. It's designed to actually be destroyed or be blown up. But the exciting thing about a Husky is that in over 7,500 mine blasts and IED explosions, we have never lost an operator to blast ever in the history of that platform. There's no other vehicle in the world, including armored tanks, armored platforms. There's no other platform in the world that has that kind of record. So we are currently delivering dozens of Huskies internationally, both to Eastern Europe and to the Middle East. And we still have an installed base of over 1,000 Huskies that we are working with the U.S. government every day on spare parts, sustainment, and training.